Moreover, the Bosnians, who say their country gradually overran from the military frontier on which the Ottoman had established themselves at Skopje, and the Albanians, who beheld their strong places, Argyro, Castrum, and Croia in Amurad's possession, were conscious that their national independence was in danger and were favorably disposed for action against the common foe. Wallachia was eager for liberation, and the unsleeping hatred of the Karamaniyans to the Ottomans made it easy for the Christian antagonists of the Sultan in Europe to distract his arms by raising war and insurrection against him in Asia. Yet there was for several years no general and vigorous confederation against the Sultan, and a checkered series of partial hostilities and negotiations filled nearly 20 years, during which the different Christian neighbors of the Sultan were sometimes his antagonists and sometimes his allies against each other. At last, the accession of Ladislaus, the third king of Lithuania and Poland, to the crown of Hungary brought fresh strength and enterprise to the Sultan's foes, and a severe struggle followed, which, after threatening the utter exclusion of the House of Ottoman from Europe, confirmed for centuries in its dominion in that continent and wrought the heavier subjugation of those who were then seeking to release themselves from its superiority. In 1424 Amurath was repulsed from Belgrade, and his generals who were besieging Hermannstadt in Transylvania met with a still more disastrous reverse. It was at Hermannstadt that the renowned Hundites first appeared in the wars between the Hungarians and the Turks. He was the illegitimate son of Sigismund, King of Hungary, and the fair Elizabeth Marcine. In his early youth he gained distinction in the wars of Italy, and communists in his memories celebrate him under the name of the White Knight of Wallachia. After some campaigns in Western Christendom, Hundides returned to protect his native country against the Ottomans. In 1442 he led a small but chosen force to the relief of Hermannstadt. He planned his movements apply, and aided by an opportune sally of the garrison, he completely defeated Mezid Bey, a Turkish general, killing 20,000 of his troops and taking prisoner Mezid Bey himself, his son, and many more. Hunyadi was no whit inferior to the fiercest Turkish generals in cruelty. Mezid Bey and his son were hewn to pieces in his presence, and one of the chief's entertainments at the triumphal feast of the victorious Hungarians was to see captive Turks slaughtered during the banquet. Amurath sent Salahaddin Pasha with an army of 80,000 men against Hunyadi to avenge this disgrace, but the white knight of the Christians called Hunyad. From the color of his armor met Selahaddin at Vasaj and thought his numbers were far inferior, utterly routed the Turks with even heavier loss than they had sustained before Hermannstadt. The next year, 1443, is the most illustrious in the career of Hunyad and brought the Ottoman power to the very brink of ruin. The Zavarian, the Bosnian, and the Wallachian princes were not actively cooperating with King Ladislaus against the Sultan, and an attack of the Karamanians on the Ottoman dominions in Asia compelled Amurad to pass over to that continent and carry on the war there in person, while he left to his generals the defense of his empire in Europe against the Hungarians and their allies. The Christian army was invaded European Turkey in the remarkable campaign of this year was the most splendid that had been assembled since the French chivalry and the Hungarians advanced against Bayazet at Nicopolis, and it was guided by the able general that Christendom had yet produced against the house of Osman. The fame of Hunyad had brought volunteers from all the nations of the West to serve under him in the holy war against the Mohammedans, and the most energetic efforts of Pope Eugenius and his legate, Cardinal Julian, had been devoted to give to these champions of their faith the enthusiasm as well as the name of crusaders. The main body of the confederates, consisting chiefly of Hungarian, Serbian, Wallachian, and German troops, crossed in the Danube near Semendra. Hunyad, at the head of 12,000 chosen cavalry, then pushed forward nearly to the walls of Nisa. King Ladislaus and the Cardinal Julian followed him with the Polish and part of the Hungarian troops and with the Crusaders from Italy. On the 3rd of November, Hunyad won the first battle of the campaign in the banks of the Morava near Nisa. The grand army of the Turks was beaten and fled beyond the Balkan with the loss of 9 standards, 4,000 prisoners, and many thousand slain. Hunyad followed close up on the field, captured the city of Sofia, and then prepared to cross the Balkan and advanced upon Philippopolis. The passage of the Balkan is an exploit almost as rare in the military history of those passages of the Alps that have conferred so much luster in Hannibal, Charlemagne, and Napoleon. Alexander forced the barrier of the Balkan in 335 before Christ, probably through the same path which Hunyad penetrated from the opposite direction in Anno Domini 1443. Murad I crossed the Balkan in 1390, and the Russian general Dibich forced his renowned mountain chain near the eastern extremity in 1827. Hunyad and Dibich are the only two commanders who have crossed it from north to south, in spite of armed opposition and the fact of their accomplishing that exploit against the same enemy. Took with an interval of nearly 4 centuries and the splendor of the success with each thereby obtained over the Ottoman power make the similitude between their achievements more remarkable. If the Balkan campaign of Niaz presents nothing equal to the noble audacity with which Dibic threw a numerically feeble army across the mountain to Adrianople, trusting to the moral effect of such a blow at the crisis, when it was dealt the actual passage with the Hungarian leader affected in the December of 1443, was a more brilliant science of mountain warfare than that of the Russian marshal in 1829, both on account of the enormous increase in the material difficulties of the transit caused by the difference of season and by reason of the superior preparation on the part of the Turks, which Huniades encountered and overcame. Two defiles, the opening on which on the northern side are near each other, one to the west named the defile of Souloderband, the other to the east that of Isladi of Sladica, leads through the Balkan on the road from Sofia to Polopolos. The Turks who defeated the passage against Huniades had barricaded both these defiles with heaps of rocks, and when they found the Hungarian vanguard approach, they poured water throughout the night down the mountain slope, which froze at its fell, and formed a wall of ice against the Christians. Undaunted by these obstacles and the weapons of the enemy, Huniades encouraged his men by voice and example to clamber onward and through the western defile until they reached a part where the old Roman works of Trajan completely barred the way. The Hungarian retreated, but it was only to advance up the eastern defile, which was less perfectly fortified. There, throughout the rest of the winter day, Huniades and his cavalry fought their gallant upward battle against Turkish arrow and scimitar amid the still more formidable perils of the precipice, the avalanche of the whelming snowdrift, and the bitter paralyzing cold. They triumphed over all, and the Christmas Day of 1443 was celebrated by the exulting Hungarians on the snow plains on the southern slopes of the conquered Balkan. The Turks who had raided and received reinforcement at the foot of Mount Konovica again fought with Huniades and were again defeated. It surprises us to read that after the last victory, the Christian army instead of pushing forward to Adrianople, returned to Buda, where Huniades displayed his trophies and his prisoners before his rejoicing fellow countrymen. There is little sign here of such high spirit as afterwards animated debauch, or even of common generalship or policy. But we may be acting unjustly if we throw on the hero of medieval Hungary to blame of this infirmity of purpose. Such an army as he led was very different in subordinated and discipline to the regular troops of modern times, or even to the Turkish troops who were its contemporaries and opponents. Amurath had been personally successful in Asia, but the defeats which his forces had sustained in Europe and the strength of the Confederacy there formed against him filled him with grave alarm. He thought by the sacrifice of the more remote conquest of his host to secure for the rest of his European dominions the same tranquillity which he had re-established in the Asiatic. After a long negotiation, a treaty of peace for 10 years was concluded at Skedin on the 12th of July 1444, by which the Sultan resigned all claims upon Serbia and recognized George Brankovic as its independent sovereign. Wallachia was given up to Hungary, and the Sultan paid 60,000 ducats for the ransom of Mahmud Chalebi, his son-in-law, who had commanded against Huniades and had been taken prisoner in the late campaign. The sea treaty has written both in the Hungarian and in the Turkish languages. King Ladislaus swore the treaty language. King Ladislaus swore upon the Gospels and the Sultan swore upon the Quran that it shall be truly and religiously observed. Amurath now thought that his realm was at peace, and that he himself, after so many years of anxiety and toil, might hope to taste and blessings of repose. We have watched him hitherto as a man of action, and we have found ample reason to admire his capacity and vigor in council and in the field. But Amurath had also other virtues of a softer order, which are not often to be found in the occupant of the Oriental throne. He was gentle and affectionate in all the relations of domestic life. Instead of seeking to assure his safety by the deeds of the two younger brothers, for whose fate their father had been so anxious, Amurath treated them with kindness and honor, while they lived and bitterly lamented their loss when they died of the plague in their palace at Brussels. The other brother who took up arms against him was killed without his orders. He forgave, for the sake of a sister who was married to the Prince of Crimean, the treasonable hostilities with which that vassal of the house of Osman assailed him, and the tears of the another sister for the captivity for the husband Muhammad Chalabi, and her entreaties that he might be rescued from the power of the terrible Hunniyads, were believed to have prevailed, much encouraging Amurath to seek the pacification of Saganin. When that treaty was concluded, Amurath passed over to Asia, where he met the deep affliction of learning the deeds of his eldest son Prince Alauddin, who had shared with him the command of the Ottoman forces in Asia during the operations of the preceding year. The bitterness of this bereavement increased the distaste which Amurath had already acquired for the pomp and turmoil of sovereignty. He determined to abdicate the throne in favor of his second son, Prince Mahomet, and to pass to the rest of his life in the retirement at Magnesia. But it was not in austere privation or in the fanatic exercise of Mahometan monasticism that Amurath designed his private life to be wasted. He was no contemner of the pleasure of sense, and this scene of his retreat was amply furnished with all the ministry of every delight.